MeherBaba said, "Trust God completely, and He will solve all difficulties. Faithfully leave everything to Him, and He will see to everything." Have you ever wondered about the power of faith and love in healing? Please stay tuned for our program as we discuss this and other questions.
I've seen him in the dawn's light, with his hair long and flowing. I feel his love around me, and I love him so much, 'cause there's just something about him I can't explain. He gives me so much to be grateful for, and yet I still complain. I feel his love for me. Yes, I can feel his love. He touches my heart, and even though I drift sometimes and lose sight of all that's real, I will try to love him more and more. And I know it won't.
Hello, and welcome to our program on MeherBaba and the Healing Arts. I'm Robert Thornburn. MeherBaba declared that he was God in human form. Today I have three guests who are all followers of MeherBaba and who are also practitioners in different healing professions. My first guest is Dr. Linda Zavala, who's a chiropractor. She's been involved in chiropractic, nutrition, and guided imagery for the last 12 years. Welcome, Linda.
Thank you.
My next guest is Jacko Caraco. Jacko is an acupuncturist and an herbalist. He's also spent a lot of time in India working with and treating some of MeherBaba's Mandali, or closest disciples. Welcome, Jacko.
Thank you.
And my next guest is Terry Lucas. Terry is a licensed marriage and family therapist. She's been in private practice for 10 years, specializing in families with addiction and abuse. Welcome, Terry.
Thanks, Rob.
I would like to start by asking each of you what attracted you to your profession, and what role does MeherBaba play in your work? Linda?
I came to chiropractic before I met MeherBaba, and it was really through intuition. I belonged to a dance group called Continuum, and the teacher, Emily Conrad, who was a wonderful artist and very intuitive person. And so I had the opportunity to do something more with my life, and I asked her what to do. And she immediately said, "Why don't you become a chiropractor?" So I just went and signed up. And this was before I even took vitamins or knew anything about health. And I just felt as soon as I had signed up for college that it was the right thing to do.
So this was quite a radical change for you then?
Yes,
coming from that.
yes. So it was before I met Baba, but I really feel that he led me to that through intuition. And that it's given me the opportunity to serve other people and to develop a correct inner attitude. So even though I'm being paid for it and doing so-called good work, it's a great place, a good environment to develop myself with Baba.
I see. So would you say Baba plays a specific role in your work when you're treating patients, or what kind of role does he?
Well, because Baba's very dynamic, I feel that he's in every aspect of what a person does. And so it's a dynamic process. And I feel Baba said that, remember that I am the doctor, the patient, and the cure. So it's in every part of it. And I think the important thing, which Baba teaches us, is to develop our intuition and to learn to listen, is that he is in each one of us, including the patient. So many times they even know themselves what is needed if I'm open to listening.
I see.
As one thing. Or sometimes I will have a dream about a patient if I'm particularly concentrating on them, and get a remedy that they need through the dream.
Really?
Yeah, and I feel that's, you know, when we can be open to intuition, that these kinds of things can come through.
Oh, well, thank you. Jacko, how about you? What attracted you to acupuncture and herbalism?
Well, I started playing doctor from age 5 And but that was out in the backyard, and that was my office. And then I guess I went away from that and for a long time. And in college, I'd say in junior high, I had a class in science, and I was very interested in the nervous system in that class. And the teacher was very encouraging. So that, again, that renewed interest in medicine started, and I used to read books on my own and all that. And so in college, I majored in biology and pre-med.
Ah.
But when it came to going to medical school, I couldn't do it. I wanted to join the Peace Corps instead. And I just couldn't, the idea of focusing and going to school again and more terrified me. So
Ah.
I left it and went to Ethiopia and taught for a couple years, and then got involved in training. And gosh, it was a long odyssey of journeys. I ended up finally in India many, many years later in the 70s, and was working in the trust office, Avatar Meher Baba Trust,
Oh, in Ahmednagar.
in Ahmednagar, as a typist. And it was interesting. I was typing and filing, and I feel like I felt a privilege to be working there, but I also felt like I was being worked on. And that filing, to me, represented slowing down again and beginning to kind of come into order. And about a year into that work, I got sick one day, and a friend of mine asked me if I wanted to take a flower remedy.
A flower remedy.
Flower remedy, a Bach flower remedy. And I said, look, I'm sick, and sick because I'm screwed up in here, and as soon as I get this mental junk sorted out, I'll get better. I had felt that medicine wouldn't work on me anymore. It was because of emotional stuff or some kind of psychological thing that if I got that sorted out, then I'd be fine. Dis-ease.
I see.
Yeah.
It was mental, you felt.
Yeah. Well, the root was there, and then when you lose it mentally, you're open to attack from all kinds of critters. So she said, oh, but this works on the emotions. I said, really? She said, yes, you treat the emotion, you don't worry about the particular problem. Well, let me try it. So she gave me some medicine, and within about 30 seconds, I felt something really different. I felt like, oh, my body's sick, but I'm okay. So I started studying that. And there were a lot of people coming to India, a lot of Westerners, pilgrims. So I used to practice on them. So I guess I started playing doctor again there. And I stayed in India for 5 years, and then I came back to the States. And after about still a little bit of poking around, wandering, I should say poking around, I'm an acupuncturist. I didn't start the poking until later. But I tried different occupations, and I finally ended up doing applied kinesiology. And that was a kind of muscle work and massage. And I was starting to be able to diagnose conditions when people were coming in, and I thought, this is getting pretty serious. I better get legal. And so acupuncture school was there, and I was very drawn to Chinese medicine because I liked the model. It seemed to be really comprehensive. It explained a lot of things that the Western model just couldn't explain for me.
I see.
Because it integrates the mind, the body, and the spirit. It doesn't really separate. If something's going off in the mental, it's going to manifest in the body somehow. And likewise, if something's off in the body, it's going to have a mental counterpart. And Chinese medicine has a model which ties it all together. You can work at one end or the other, and by working at one end, you can affect the other because it's connected.
I see.
So I just went for it and joined the school and survived it somehow.
So do you feel Baba then was actually instrumental in getting you to become an acupuncturist?
Yeah, of course.
And what, does he play a major role then in your treating of patients?
Yeah.
Is there any specific way? that you would say that?
Well, of course I have a skill and I've learned some techniques and all that, but he guides me. And what happens is, though I have these skills and techniques and I know points and all that, I usually, before I put a needle in anybody, I go inside and I ask for help from Baba. And I just get really quiet and pop, 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 P6, SJ5, you know, things start coming up inside. And I go, yeah, right, that fits what's going on here. And oh, okay, it becomes kind of a, I'm almost observing the connections that are being made inside. And yeah, that's very good. I think I'll use that. And then I go ahead and work. And then I listen. Because as Linda was saying so beautifully, Baba's in all of us. So the patients are the key. They tip you off all the time. Little things that they say, it's really important to hold on to all the little tidbits of information from the minute they walk in the door, you know. Gee, I got lost coming over here, you know, well, aha, that's a point for me, you know. Confusion or something, it triggers things. So they tell you what's happening if you just listen.
I see.
And also some very funny kinds of circumstances. A patient will come in with a problem, and I'll be a little bit perplexed, and they'll leave, and then I'll get a phone call from somebody that's telling me about this. Now, these are very strong coincidences, or I'll see something on the news, or something like that.
Synchronicity.
It's just synchronized.
All points to it.
Yeah, I go, oh, there it is.
Uh-huh.
So,
well, thank you.
you're welcome.
Terry, family therapist, marriage counselor.
Yes.
How about you? What attracted you to that? Seems like a pretty demanding profession to me.
I actually started out as an archaeologist.
Really?
And I was in school studying anthropology, archaeology, but this is the height of the Vietnam War and the hippie era, and all of a sudden my friends were diving off of roofs, and I seemed to know quite a few people who were having trouble emotionally. In the middle of this, I became very attracted to psychology and shifted majors. But I also kept my finger in the humanities and have a degree in architecture and art history. It may not seem like it coordinates, but to me it does. In my profession, you're always searching for keys and clues in the history of people and gluing them back together and making a wholeness is what this is all about. So I didn't find it too much of a shift, actually, to go from archaeology to psychology.
Sure.
And I've always been interested in how families and how cultures work, so it was just a natural
step for you.
And also, when I heard about Bob, I was in abnormal psychology class in a very Virginia Orthodox school. And anything Eastern was not obvious in the area that I was brought up in. And to hear about Meher Baba in abnormal psychology after we just read a bit about how people who thought they were God or felt God within them were crazy was an interesting little triggering. And that's when I first heard Baba's name, was in abnormal psychology class when someone was asking another person if they'd like to attend a meeting about Meher Baba at Judge Henry Kashadi's house in Hampton, Virginia.
Wow.
And that was almost 20 years ago.
That's been quite a while.
Yeah, it has.
Well, thank you. We're going to take a short pause here and allow some of our viewers to see some photos of Baba and along with some music, and we'll be back in about, I guess, about 4 or 5 minutes and continue the discussion.
Thank you. Hey, that's great. That's so fast. I can't believe it.
Stranger instead, hopes flicker and Everything you need is here tonight. Awaken from your dream and step out into the light. When true lovers meet, surrender complete. Turn to me like the rising sun. I'll be your perfect one. Turn to me. Turn to me like the river's race to meet the sea's embrace. Turn to me.
Turn around, take it to him.
Don't you know I'm always waiting?
Turn around, take it to him.
Well, open your heart and let me in.
Welcome back to our program on Meher Baba and the Healing Arts. We're talking with 3 different practitioners in healing professions. And Terry, I wanted to ask you, you're a family therapist. How does that affect you, being a Baba follower? And do you ever have any kind of conflicts because of that?
No, not really. I'm also in 12-step programs.
Oh, okay.
And I participate in, and many of my clients are from 12-step programs, and it's a very spiritual-based program. But when I was discovering family therapy as a branch to go into from psychology, what I read in the discourses by Avatar Meher Baba was very reflective of what I was reading in all my studies about how families came together, how we choose our families. Virginia Satir, a very famous family therapist, has often said over and over again that we choose our families for specific things that we're working on. And I have seen that continually in my practice, how people come together for learning, and it's always a spiritual base. There's something called positive intent, which is no matter how bad the situation, the bottom line is people are trying to get something good. And they sometimes go about it a little backwards. And it's my job to point out road signs and actually my job is to get out of the way and let them discover what's really happening within themselves, and that's God. I also think that one of the things that Meher Baba said was that you either take a celibate path or you marry. Now, even if you're celibate, you have a family. So as a family therapist, you're always interacting no matter what side of the spiritual path you take. You always have to interact with people. And I find my best work is when I'm not there. I just let Baba take over, and particularly if I'm in a situation where I'm not sure what's going on. If I get out of the way and just let it happen, it always works out to the advantage of the client so that he can discover where he's going on his own.
I see. Did Baba say anything specifically about the family unit or families in general?
Well, no, not specifically, although he often said that families, being in the world is very important and being responsible is very important. He always encouraged people to learn more about themselves, and he was always very open about self-discovery and being responsible, and psychology was something he was always very interested in. And I think that the exploration and the interest that you've seen in the last several years has been because of his touch and grace. That more and more people are looking towards themselves, and when you look towards yourself, you're trying to find God. And in 12-step programs, that's repeated, that if you get out of the way and stop trying to control a situation, of which most of it is self-produced, you know, I might say, Meher Baba said over and over again that most of the problems we produce ourselves, and then there are things that come into the world to learn, that if people get different ways or tools to handle a situation, including humor, which I think one of the reasons I was attracted to Meher Baba was the humor, is it's not always so terrible. I mean, even the worst situation sometimes is the funniest thing on earth when you get a little distance from it.
Yeah, maybe when you're not going through it. Yeah.
And sometimes when you're going through it, if you can get to the sense of humor, that's very healing. And I feel that one of my jobs as a therapist is to point out that nothing is always negative. There are other alternatives.
Well, thank you.
Thanks.
Jacko, I wanted to ask you, I know you spent a lot of time in India, and there must be like an experience or story you'd like to share about maybe working with Baba's Mandali, his closest disciples, either treating them or working with them, or maybe an anecdote, you know, about Baba.
Ooh, you got me on that one. Nothing is popping into my head. But one thing that I observed over there, which I felt is really important, it's I feel that the clinic in Meherzad that Baba has set up, and MeherBabaLibrary has 2 clinics that are free to villagers there. And they see about 125 to 150 people a day in those clinics.
Wow.
And you have every modality working there. There are Western-trained medical doctors. There are homeopathic doctors, physical therapists. There's an acupuncturist there. And there are all the pilgrims who come over, want to serve in the clinic during their visit. So they bring their skills. So there's chiropractic and psychotherapy. You worked in the clinic also.
Yeah.
And it's all welcome. And it's just beautiful. It's headed by Dr. Goher. Dr. Goher was Baba's physician. And she is so open to all the forms. And she's always encouraging people to study, the one that they like the best. And she's always saying, well, I think this patient would do better with the flower remedies, and maybe this patient should have chiropractic treatment, and whatever is best. And the doctors there also integrate. They work together. They talk. They're in the same room. It's like a train station in a way. What, you were going to say something?
I was going to say it sounds totally the opposite of any kind of clinic you'd see over here. I mean, having different professions working together.
It's
different.
It's wonderful.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
exciting.
It's also in
Everybody's-
Marathi.
Yeah, right.
So it's hard to say, what's bothering you or how's your family? It's like
Trying to understand,
yeah,
yes.
really.
I want to ask you, did Baba request any particular type of treatment when he was ill or
It would
injured?
depend most of the time, because Dr. Goher was trained as an allopathic physician, so that was the what do you call it, the medicine of choice. It was what was available. But he also had Padri, who lived at Meherbad, doing and encouraged him in homeopathy. He took medicine from Padri for certain things. He would take, I believe, also herbal remedies from Chuggan Master, who was an Ayurvedic doctor. And Dr. Gunny was another disciple who was a homeopathic physician. And
Dr. Kenmore.
So he
Dr.
didn't,
Kenmore was a chiropractor. He would come over and treat Baba. So he took
so
them all.
anything goes, basically.
Yeah, and,
He would-
and very often he'd say, look, and none of it works. He says, you're all charlatans.
on him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
on him. He said, this is my none of your medicine will work on me. My suffering has to be, it's my universal work.
I see. That must have been very frustrating for them, I'm sure.
Well, I think they understood
They
that it
accepted
was a
it.
privilege for them to work on Baba, and the love that was exchanged was what made it worthwhile.
I see. Well, thank you.
May I comment on that?
Sure, please do, Linda.
I think that what Meher Baba was doing, since everything he does is important for the world, was kind of a prototype for holistic healing. Because even in the early days, he had different physicians work with him. And when traditionally most doctors were men, he had a woman physician become his personal physician. And then in the early days of chiropractic, he had a chiropractor treat him, which was not the most popular thing.
All right.
And in India, it was practically unknown.
Sure, I'm sure.
And so he really encouraged these different things and people working together in harmony. And I think that was symbolic of the time that would come in the world of holistic healing.
I see. Is there a quote you'd like to share with us about?
Yes.
Just happen to have it here.
Baba said, the remedy for all ills is to remember me constantly and wholeheartedly. And I feel that for anyone interested in God, if they have an illness, if they can focus on God as they see God or their inner self or their higher self, they will be helped by it. They will be comforted or soothed and or even seek the cure from going within. Something I'd like to say about Baba is that he was very practical. He emphasized living a natural life and being very practical as well as being spiritual. So everything he did had a practical element to it, and I think that's very important because it gives us a hand in seeking God through the practical, because we're in our bodies and we're not perfect yet. So it allows us to stay in touch or to be grounded in that.
I see.
I just remember something too. You know, whenever Baba would see people, the first thing he would ask would be, you know, how's your health?
Right.
You know, the pulse,
Yeah.
sleep well, eating well, all that. And he would tell people, you know, that it's useless to meditate and all that kind of stuff if you aren't really physically taking care of yourself, because your mind is going to be on all that stuff instead of God. So take care of yourself first.
Did Baba perform any miracles?
Well, I always said no.
Yeah,
But, you know, I mean,
he made me go back to school and become an acupuncturist. That is
He
a
made me-
That
miracle.
sounds like,
and I did, the hardest thing I had to do was to go into psychology when I wanted to hide out in the bottom of a museum someplace and put something together, you know.
Make dinosaurs.
He makes you face what you're afraid of.
wow.
Baba said that life itself is the supreme miracle, and to be born again in the Spirit is the miracle of miracles.
Great.
And I feel many times that when people do have a miracle, they do have a spiritual component to that, a spiritual upliftment many times.
I see. Well, I'd like to thank all three of you for being here on the show and sharing your different perspectives. And I'd like to thank all you viewers out there for tuning in. In addition, I'd like to mention to all you viewers that are interested in finding out more about Meher Baba that there is a center here in Los Angeles devoted to Baba, the Avatar Meher Baba Center of Southern California, and that is located at 10808 Santa Monica Boulevard in West Los Angeles. And there are regular weekly meetings every Saturday night at 8 o'clock. For further information, you can call 474-9454. And thank you.